Hi, my name is TJ Lacabone, and I am the Sales Engineering Manager for North America at Cynet. Today we're going to review a live ransomware attack chain, and we're going to show how Cynet provides visibility and automation into those attack sequences to be able to provide you with a faster mean time to respond in a matter of minutes instead of hours or even days. A couple of things to understand about what we're doing here. First, we are working inside of a virtual environment. You'll notice that I do have several remote clients inside of this environment. We have a domain workstation, a domain controller, and a work group that happens to be on the same network. We also have a Linux system that's going to be acting as our attack server that is going to be providing the email that starts off the sequence of events that you would typically find in a ransomware attack. The second thing to understand is that we have configured the Cynet product to be detect only. The reason that we have it for detect only is that threats work as a sequence of events. If we stop it in the very first stage in that sequence, then we have no visibility in the rest of the sequence. By allowing it to run completely through, we can illustrate how Cynet has visibility into the multiple stages of the attack chain and be able to provide you with better understanding and better comfort knowing that Cynet has such deep visibility and the ability to respond at each one of those stages. Finally, the last thing to understand is while this is a ransomware simulation, it is just that, a simulation. This is not true live ransomware. We didn't go out and get a copy of something like Lockbit or Loki or Petya or any of the other ransomware providers out there, nor did we subscribe to a ransomware as a service and get a copy of ransomware. We are utilizing a customized version of an encryption tool to act as our ransomware function. Because keep in mind that effective ransomware utilizes legitimate encryption processes because they are effective at being able to prevent access to an object if you do not have the encryption key. And all the attacker is doing is ensuring that you don't have the key after they have encrypted their files. So in our case, we have done fundamentally the exact same thing. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a piece of ransomware that has never been seen before because, well, I crafted it. With all that groundwork being laid, we are now going to go into our client system and interact with the threat like an end user would. But first, we do need to trigger the email. So we'll have that email show up to the end user system. So let's go ahead and open up Outlook. And as you can see, we have the email just arrived. And when we take a look at it, it looks like a legitimate email, right? We generally know that attackers will do a lot of legwork to identify things that users are likely to access with very little inspection. And so they will dig into social media posts and follow them on LinkedIn, and they will gain access and follow on Instagram and X and so forth to understand what that person's activities are like so that they can craft the attack to be something that they are likely to pay very little attention to because they're so common to them. For me, I travel a lot and I go to Courtyard Marriotts on a regular basis. I generally stay at many Marriott properties. So for me, seeing a email that says, thank you for choosing your hotel with us at your recent stay, that's very common for me. I may not give it a second thought when I go to open this message. And that's exactly what the attacker is looking for. Now, if I spend a little time digging, it does still look very legitimate, right? These links are pointing to the right locations, right? Shop.courtyard is going to shop.courtyard. The privacy statement points to the proper privacy location. The terms of use points to the proper terms of use location. So this all looks legitimate. That is until I start digging in a little bit deeper and I notice that there is no email address associated with Marriott customer service. It is simply just the name being presented and not the actual email address. And if I'm paying even closer attention, I might notice that this is a Word document with a macro in it, indicated by the .docm extension. I may have forgotten or not paid close enough attention to realize that most of the receipts that I get, well, I would say pretty much all the receipts that I get from Marriott are PDF files. But again, not paying close enough attention, I just assume that this is probably a receipt. I'm going to have to do an expense report. So let me go ahead and save this. And when we save it, we see that first step in the chain of events. In this case, the payload document being identified as having some actions inside of it that are going to be detrimental to my system. The macro is intentionally going to reach out to the payload server, pull down the payload. It's then going to copy that payload to the other systems inside my environment. Now, because it is set to alert only, the file does save. And if I go into my documents folder, we can see that the document is there. Now, normally, if you were to open a Word doc that has a macro, there will be some security settings in place that triggers to tell the end user, hey, there's a macro in here. Be very judicious on whether or not you enable the macro to run. However, if you properly craft it or improperly craft that document, you can compromise the Word program to run regardless of those particular settings, which is what we have done here. Now, before we do that, I want you to be aware of the chain of events because it will happen pretty quickly. So if we jump over to our domain controller, we have a folder called shared files that's available on the network that any domain member can have access to. We also have a workgroup client that has also a shared files folder that is simply just anybody on the network can have access to. Not the most secure type of environment, but again, ones that do exist. So if nothing else you take from this presentation, you go back and you double check your permissions on your shares inside your environment to ensure that you are at least limiting access in many cases. However, with that domain controller, I have access to it because I am a domain member. I have the sufficient privileges. So I would still be able to, or the process and the malware would still be able to copy itself to it in that case. The workgroup client, on the other hand, that's obviously a different story. But we're going to see that the system copies it over there. It is also going to download it, and this is not typically the case, but it is for illustration purposes. It's going to copy that file down to the downloads folder so that we can verify that, yep, it did pull it down. It is then going to launch it on my system after it had copied it to the two other systems, at which point it's going to attempt to encrypt some files, right? Now, in so doing, it's also going to generate additional alerts. So let's go ahead and start this back off. So let's go back to documents. Into the right documents folder, and we will go ahead and open our Word doc. Now, by opening it, we can see that we get a couple of pop-ups, right? First, we get the notification. We saw a DOS prompt box or a command shell prompt box. We also have a little error messaging here that the ransomware was apparently trying to write to a location that it didn't have access to. So it gets a path and file access error. Now, a ransomware that is quote unquote properly crafted wouldn't generally inform the user of this stuff. Most of those activities would be hidden in the background that the end user wouldn't normally see it, right? They want to fly under the radar for as long as they possibly can. However, in our case, we still have the notification from Cynet informing us that we have a critical event where a malicious file operation was made, i.e., it was trying to encrypt files. Now, while this happened here, we can take a look at, let's go ahead and close this out. We can take a look at our domain controller. We can see, yep, hey, there's a copy of this new file. Trust me, it's safe. Well, I'm going to say that it's probably not safe, so let's not launch it. We're going to go ahead and take a look at, again, the workgroup client. And again, it says, trust me, it's safe, right? So this is the macro having pulled down that payload, pushed it out to those two other systems. And of course, if we look on the client, that we triggered it on, we can again see in downloads, there is that copy of Trust Me, It's Safe, where it wrote to it locally before launching it and attacking the local host. Now, as we saw those alerts generated and popped up, if we go over to our management console, we are also going to see those alerts arrive there as well. And so we can see the activity that it has generated inside the environment. And we can see that it starts off with that macro document, excuse me, where it was being written to the disk and then where it was being executed. Right now, we have it set this way again for visibility purposes so that you can see what was going on as part of this attack chain, right? Then we have the execution of that piece of ransomware where it is trying to encrypt the files. So we can see the MITRE attack tactic and technique. So T1486, which is data encryption for impact. And if we click on it, we can see a full write-up of the purpose of this tactic and technique. So we know exactly what the attacker was trying to do. However, having a name like data encrypted for impact is pretty self-explanatory, right? And if we take a little bit deeper, we can see what was going on, what it was trying to do. And you can see that it did try to encrypt a file, and it has given it that extension of lockbit, right? Because this is somewhat derived off of the lockbit ransomware. Now, while all this happened, we gathered all this information into the management console, and we have automatically started to investigate it. Now, I've been talking for somewhere around 10-ish minutes or so, maybe about 11. And in that time, from when I triggered the event, it's only been about 3 minutes, okay? Because we can see the timestamp of 2104 and the clock on my system, which I don't believe I'm sharing out, is currently 2107. So about a 3-minute gap from when I triggered it and right now. And in that time, the system has begun investigating it. It has started to take the evidence from the event and, like a detective, investigate it throughout the rest of my environment. Now, we know that we dropped the files on those other systems. We know that the Cynet product is running on those systems, tracking changes, tracking activity, seeing what's going on, and has reported into the management console, hey, I got this file, I got that file, this process started. Well, with all that data up here in the central console, the system was able to take the evidence from the event, investigate the rest of the environment, and find out how widespread this is. Now, keep in mind that we do have this set for detection only, so it's not going to take action on it directly, right? You'll notice that it says autonomous response is paused, so it's waiting for me to tell it to proceed. Now, that being the case, it is still doing its investigation. We can see it's still in progress, but even in that short time frame, that 4 minutes, 5 minutes so far, it has not only identified it on the one host that it triggered on, it has also found it on 3 other systems. And so we can see 10.2, which is our domain controller. We can see the local host that this is the .4, which is the domain client, and on the local host, in which case it was pulled down to that downloads directory, Trust Me, It's Safe. And so we have all the visibility about what happened from that single event automated inside the platform. Now, if I choose, I can trigger the response and I can quarantine that file from here and hit the remediation button. But I could also simply just have my policy configured to do prevention for me. In which case, the system will then automate that response. So not only will it automate the investigation, it will also automate the response to what it has found inside that environment. So not only would it prevent it from running on system A, it would investigate it and find it elsewhere and respond to it there, right? Now, because of the fact that we did catch it at that document file level, then none of those steps would have started. But you can picture that if we didn't catch it at that first phase, it was able to download it and put it on those other systems. Then it triggered at the second phase. We catch it there. We then do the investigation and see it elsewhere. Or maybe we don't catch it on system number 1, but we did find it getting dropped on system number 2. We catch it there on arrival or on execution there. Because we have this interconnected visibility in our data lake, we have the ability to investigate and respond automatically, reducing that time to response down to minutes and move it out of the hours and days or even weeks long period of time. Now, behind all of this is our 24/7 SOC. We monitor everything that goes on inside of our customers' environments, and that is not simply just an eyes on glass function. We are also going to assist you in responding to it. So if this happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, we would pick up the phone, give you a call, and walk you through the process of responding to the threat, and not simply just inform you, hey, we saw this as a threat, so we isolated the host. These are the things that you should do. Have a nice day. Right? We are collaborative in our SOC. It is a true SOC that is open to access bi-directionally from you to us, as well as from us to you. Now, this brings us to the end of the ransomware presentation. I hope that you found it informative, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.